Welcome to your deep dive on Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. We've got the text itself, obviously, but you've also sent in some seriously interesting critical commentary, which I love. Get ready to unpack romance, societal satire, and characters so vividly drawn, they practically leap off the page, even after centuries.
It's true, those characters really stay with you. And beyond that captivating love story, Austen offers a pretty sharp social commentary. She's not directly criticizing the English gentry, but
She's sneaky about it.
exactly. She subtly skewers their obsession with class, marriage as a financial transaction, all of it, and especially the immense pressure on women.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little. It's like we're getting a glimpse behind the curtain of this seemingly charming world.
Right, like take Mrs. Bennet, for instance. She's almost comical, right, in her desperation to marry off her daughters.
Oh, absolutely.
But her anxiety, it comes from a place of stark reality. I mean, without a son to inherit, the Bennet daughters are incredibly vulnerable financially. Austen makes us laugh, but she also makes you think about the limited options for women then.
It really makes you appreciate Elizabeth's independent spirit, huh?
It really does.
And speaking of characters, Austen is she's a master of character development, isn't she? They're not just charming or witty, they're flawed, they're complex. And that's what makes them feel so real even after all this time.
Absolutely. Consider Darcy for a moment. He's initially presented as this aloof and arrogant, the stereotypical proud aristocrat. But as the story unfolds and we get his perspective, we see a different side. His pride, for instance, it's not just arrogance, is it?
No, definitely not.
It masks a deep sense of responsibility. This strict moral code governs his actions, even when those actions seem misguided.
It's like when he helps Lydia, even though he knows the scandal could completely ruin him. That's not exactly typical behavior for, well, anyone, let alone a proud aristocrat.
Yeah.
It really highlights the depth Austen brings to these characters, the way they develop and evolve as we go along.
It's that complexity, the flaws and internal struggles, that makes these characters relatable even now. I mean, Elizabeth, as intelligent and independent as she is, even she's not immune to prejudice.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Her initial dismissal of Darcy, just based on his social standing and Wickham's lies prime example, it reminds us that intelligence doesn't preclude prejudice.
You're right. It's fascinating. It's like that initial prejudice. It's what fuels Elizabeth's development, It's through really understanding Darcy that she confronts her own misjudgments. And then ultimately, I think she's able to see the world in a more nuanced light, right?
It makes you think we all have biases, don't we? It's like it's only through self-reflection and being open to challenging our own perspectives that we can really overcome them. But, going back to Elizabeth's wit for a second, it's often celebrated, and for good reason, but I've always been struck by the way she uses it almost like a means of, social survival.
That's an interesting point, especially when you think about the society she's navigating, right? Where women were basically defined by their, marriageability. Her intelligence, it could be an asset, but it could also be a threat.
Totally.
Her wit, though, it allows her to handle those rigid social circles, deflect any unwanted attention, even challenge those expectations a little. Think about her back and forths with Mr. Collins, or even Lady Catherine.
You're so right. It's like she's using it to, subtly rebel against a world that wants to silence her. She's not just sitting around waiting for some guy to save her. She's out there shaping her own destiny. Now, switching gears a bit, Darcy, he's often seen as this brooding romantic hero, but he's so much more than that. What do you think?
Oh, 100%. Again, Austen uses his initial impressions, and then, boom, she surprises us with how complex he really is. He starts as that typical aloof, arrogant aristocrat, but then we see these flashes of vulnerability, especially when he's with Elizabeth.
It's so interesting how captivated he is by her, almost like he's fighting it. You can see it in those awkward conversations, that disastrous first proposal, even just like the way he watches her. I read one critic who described Darcy as being bewitched by Elizabeth, which I think is so spot on.
It really is, because it captures that feeling of his walls just crumbling, this carefully constructed persona. And then Elizabeth, with her intelligence and wit, she just breaks through it. He can't help but be drawn to her. And that transformation from that haughty aloofness to genuine admiration, that's a huge part of what makes him so compelling, I think. And it's not just the romance of it all, it's his integrity, that fundamental goodness that he has.
And that whole incident with Lydia, it really underscores that sense of honor, doesn't it? I mean, he could just brushed it aside, protected himself, his reputation.
Right, exactly.
But he doesn't. He jumps right in, knowing it could ruin him, and all for a family that, well, let's face it, he considers beneath him. It's a lot, don't you think?
It really does. You see the true measure of his character there. He doesn't act out of self-preservation or even because society dictates it. It's this deep-seated sense of duty, of responsibility. It's really a testament to, how much he's grown, wouldn't you say?
I think so. To be able to put aside those ingrained prejudices and just see the inherent worth of people, regardless of their social standing,
Yeah.
makes you wonder how much has society actually changed since Austen's time. I mean, we're not all navigating marriage markets and, whatever country dances were.
Right.
But still, those themes of social pressure, class, the struggle to just be yourself, it's all, surprisingly relevant, even now, centuries later.
That's Austen for you. She hit on something timeless about, the human condition itself.
Yeah.
Even a character like Lady Catherine, who seems so overbearing, almost comical at times, right? She becomes so much more interesting when you think about her in context.
That's a great point. She's a product of her time and place, isn't she? A woman who's only known privilege, control. So all those often comical attempts to manipulate everything around her, they make sense. It's fear, isn't it?
Yes. Fear of losing that control, of her world shrinking.
Exactly. And it makes Elizabeth's rebellious spirit stand out even more, don't you think? It's that clash, individual freedom versus society's expectations. And Austen doesn't shy away from the consequences of defying those expectations either, especially for women, like Lydia's elopement with Wickham.
Oh, absolutely.
What seems romantic on the surface almost takes down her whole family.
It's scary how precarious things were for women then. One wrong step and that was it.
And what's interesting? Even Elizabeth, our smart, independent heroine, she makes mistakes too. Her initial prejudice against Darcy, it almost costs her everything.
But that's what makes her journey so powerful, right?
Yeah.
She's not perfect. Nobody is. She's flawed. She messes up, but she learns. She grows from it. That's what Austen captures so well. Her characters feel real, capable of great mistakes, but also remarkable growth.
And it's that journey, I think, that still resonates with people today. It's like one of the biggest takeaways from the novel. Challenge your own prejudices and look beyond just appearances.
Absolutely. At its heart, Pride and Prejudice is about breaking down those barriers. Internal ones, societal ones. It's about finding real connection, real happiness.
It encourages us to confront our own biases and to approach, everything and everyone with more empathy, more understanding.
Pride and Prejudice really does offer something new with every read. It's a story that it sticks with you. It makes you think about love, about society, about yourself.
So what resonates most with you? Is it Elizabeth's independent spirit, the kind of slow burn of Darcy's redemption? Or maybe that realization that some things in society, haven't changed as much as we think? Keep those thoughts brewing. This deep dive might be over, but your exploration, that's just begun.